Our guest today is State Representative Geist from Altoona, the longtime chairman of the House Transportation Committee. Our topic is transportation. Namely, about 6 months ago, the governor had commissioned and received a pretty comprehensive report about transportation funding in Pennsylvania going into the future. Not much has happened in a final way about that. What do you see happening in the next month or so?
Well, the governor had a huge amount of information to work with. He had, first of all, the commission that I served on with Rendell, which never did anything. And then he had the TAC committee, Transportation Advisory Committee, report that I thought was, out of the three, the best that was done. And all of these reports show that with local government, they need north of $3.5 billion to really work on the problem. Not to totally solve it, but to fix broken transportation in Pennsylvania. We are desperately in a hole, and the governor has finally recognized that a little bit, so maybe we are moving ahead.
I noticed since we last talked, just in the last 2 weeks, the state has announced that they're going to close, or they have closed, the bridge between Denora and Webster on the Monongahela River. An old bridge, admittedly, but it's so old that they don't feel they can afford to refurbish it and make it safe, so they'll just closed it entirely. Are we going to see more of that in Pennsylvania if we don't get a highway funding solution?
Yeah, I do, because that bridge is dangerous. That's truly a dangerous bridge to send anybody over, let alone a school bus full of kids. Pennsylvania has a terrible problem. It's not self-healing. It's not getting any better at all. Because it's not in the news doesn't mean that they're fixing it. And the bridge, to take a bridge down to a level of a 3-ton posting, there's a tremendous amount of engineering work that goes into that. And once you start dialing a deficient bridge down, the amount of work and the cost of replacing that bridge goes up. I think that there are so many 3-ton weight limited bridges right now in Pennsylvania. Without resources, the secretary has no recourse other than to close them. And you're only kidding yourself if you keep them open, because you're playing Russian roulette with some very, very bad structures. Now, the Denora Bridge brings up another fact. A lot of the really old bridges in Pennsylvania were built right. They were wonderful structures. Along about the time you and I came into government, a little bit before, we started value engineering, so that you wanted to get the most bridge you could for the best price. So in reality, you started building 40-year bridges rather than 100-year bridges. Well, right now we have some of those value engineering bridges, especially on the interstate, that are in worse shape than some of the old bridges that are in bad shape. So when you're the governor of Pennsylvania and you're charged with maintaining the infrastructure of the state, where do you start? Well, first of all, you have to have a General Assembly that cooperates enough to raise the revenue and has the trust in the department to actually do the job. We've got a wonderful Secretary of Transportation, and we've got very, very good people at the administrative level in PennDOT. And I think it's time that we fund them, turn them loose, and fix broken bridges, and broken roads. We have more broken roads in Pennsylvania, more miles of it. Bridges get all the attention, but we have over 7,000 miles of roadway that must be rebuilt, not fixed, rebuilt. Subgrade, sub-basin drainage before you put any pavement on it. That's real expensive work. That's enough to go to California and back.
One of the things that the voter or the motorist gripes about is the idea that roads and bridges wear out. It's hard for people to accept that you pay a toll on a road and you think you've built it forever, and 30 years later they want to rebuild it. Is that the way things should be, and is that the way they are?
Well, I think that you have to approach it from the fact that no matter what you pay or how you pay it, it's a user's fee. And the only way that you can maintain the system is if you dedicate all the money that comes in to go into the system. And once you do that, it's a matter of convincing the public that you have to have enough user's fee to actually have the roads safe and usable. And we haven't addressed capacity. We can talk about that a little bit later if you want to.
Well, let's address capacity. Why didn't I think of that?
Well, we have a terrible capacity problem in some places, whether it's around Pittsburgh or around Philadelphia or Bethlehem, East, and we haven't really addressed capacity problems. and we need to. Now, when you take a look at the interstates, the capacity problems cost us money. Interstate 81, 78, and 83 in this part of the state, you have more square feet of warehouse space in the York-Harrisburg area than the whole state combined. And so this is a shipping, switching mecca for north, south, east, west. And you have to have good highways. Interstate 78 was never even built as an interstate, and it has traffic on it that's unbelievable. It was built for 15,000 vehicles a day max. Well, you're doing better than 80,000 a day on 78 with surge traffic, and half of those are 18-wheelers. Short ramps, sharp radiuses. I mean, this is a killer road. And the only way you're going to improve a killer road like this is to re-engineer it, rebuild it, and make sure that you can move trucks. Trucking companies don't like to pay 2 drivers to go the length of Pennsylvania when they don't have to. And scheduling wise, when you talk to the big companies, and that's why the big trucking companies have favored increasing fuel cost at the pump so that they can have adequate highways.
And ICC rules are 8-hour shift?
Yeah, they got to park it.
So you have to park.
Yeah, either that or keep a different set of books. They don't want to go to prison. So they, if you keep legitimate books, you've got a limited driving range, and it's tough to make mileage when you're averaging 17 mile an hour.
You talked about a user's fee, which people, the polls show people would accept, or they do accept the idea that they should pay to use the highways.
I've never seen a poll yet that the public didn't say that you should collect adequate fees to pay for the system, no matter how the question's asked or presented.
Well, if there's a bill introduced, or there are bills introduced.
There have been bills introduced.
Is there a will among a majority of the members of the General Assembly to provide the users' fees to raise $3.5 million?
I would think that it all depends on who's leading the band. No orchestra can play a symphony without a good conductor. In the case of our business, the conductor's the governor of Pennsylvania. And we have guys who play basses, and we have guys that play guitars. But you got to put them all together. And I think that can be done.
This year, you think, before
I think that we've reached such a crisis problem, and this is just not overnight. The governor has answered this question the same way. We haven't gotten this way just overnight. In 1997, the last revenue increase was passed for Pennsylvania. For the feds, it was 1992. We have a completely diminished cash flow coming from Washington. We'll be lucky, truly lucky, if we hold our own harmless. So it puts tremendous pressure back on the state to fund and fix its infrastructure. Now, in 1997, when this was passed, we needed 8 cents a gallon. We got the equivalency of 3.5, and that's with all the fees and everything else thrown in. When we made that vote, we knew we were going backwards. And I've been on the State Transportation Commission for over 30 years. And we have a 12-year plan in Pennsylvania. That 12-year plan is now the 36-year plan, and it's not getting done. PennDOT is cutting back and cutting back and cutting back. You still have to maintain what you have, and you still have to kind of preserve the system. So a really good Secretary of Transportation, as we have, and Scott Christie's the deputy in charge of the highway, we have good people. We have good people on the finance side of it. But you can't fix nothing unless you have something to work with. And that's the message. The message is, this is our house, this is our infrastructure. We must be responsible for it. I think the infrastructure and education are two things that are mandated constitutionally that we must do. And as chairman of the Transportation Committee, it's my job, because of the information sources that we have, is to ring that bell and make that message very clear.
We talked about the Denora to Webster Bridge. Is that just maybe the first of a series of closures or markdowns of total weight that you expect this year?
I think it's going to deteriorate to the point that you're going to have a lot of closings. You don't have money to fix or maintain. And when you've got north of 5,000, probably now around 6,000 deficient bridges, we have more deficient bridges than all the states around us combined and all of New England together. And of course, we're in the real heart of the freeze-thaw cycle, so we beat our infrastructure up.
And you're talking about a 3-ton load limit, 6,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Is that like 2 cars on a bridge at the same time?
Well, it'll be less than that. And it's we have bridges in Pennsylvania now where the school bus stops. The kids get out, they walk across it, and then they take the bus over. Now in Cambria County, where summer comes on a Wednesday in some of these places, that's rough on the kids.
Okay, let's take this moment to shift gears a little bit about another piece of legislation, perhaps related, that you have in the House, the P3, Public-Private Partnership Bill. What's the prognosis for that piece of legislation?
Well, if we can get some help, it's passed its second consideration, and it's up for a final vote after 9 years, either yes or no. And if we can implement that legislation, which I think we can, it becomes a wonderful tool for PennDOT and the governor to bring private investment into the state of Pennsylvania in transportation. Not necessarily highways, but also rails and ports. And based upon the different companies that have talked to us, I think that it's going to be much bigger than we ever anticipated it was going to be.
Talking about rail, that's one of the things that I think, again, the average citizen who drives their interstates sees a lot of trucks and wonders, where they all came from, and is there any alternative, either building truck lanes that are maybe tolled just for truckers, or perhaps building a parallel trailer train kind of a rail track. Are those things you think could be funded by a P3?
They're absolutely in the mix, and there are people that are looking at doing it right now.
So
when we talk about 81 and 78, you have companies that are definitely interested in taking over those systems and building high-speed truck lanes, doing the maintenance for the whole system. And of course, you always have a free lane where you can park and watch the trucks go by at 70 miles an hour.
So if your bill passes, you think that there's an appetite out there that people would be willing to come in short turnaround, 6 months, a year?
Yeah, that once it's set up at PennDOT, and I believe now that with the mechanics of it, once it's signed into law, PennDOT can be ready to rock and roll in 6 months.
So the kind of message here that I think I'm hearing you say, is that a motorist who wouldn't necessarily be interested in a public-private partnership to help him or her could see reduced congestion on major interstates through the opportunity for private funding, private management for trucks only.
There are about 14 big projects in Pennsylvania that would be low-hanging fruit. I use, for an example, the Schuylkill Expressway, or I-95. And one of the things that we've been laying out is a scenario about how would this actually happen. The I-95 corridor, the maintenance of it alone is over 5 times what the total state construction budget is of $1.3 billion. That means we don't have any money to really maintain I-95. And with traffic counts as high as 215,000 vehicles a day, it becomes a real ideal concession to be run as a P3, because a company then would be able to come in with a partnership with financing, do the whole project, put another deck on it, and double the capacity, and then charge time of day pricing. Now, when we say time of day pricing, it's not necessarily a methodology of grabbing as much money as you can. It's being able to use that computer-generated traffic control to keep your traffic going at a minimum of 60 miles an hour, so that you would have a limit to how many people could actually use the faster lanes. You would still have one lane on I-95, north and south, that would be free. So people would always have the luxury of parking on I-95 also. But do you have the ability to generate that kind of upfront income to build this? Absolutely. What would it do in the community? Well, first of all, it's a real job creator, true jobs. And I know I've been criticized for saying that, about creating jobs. I've been criticized by saying that they're part-time jobs in construction. Well, all jobs in construction are part-time until you go to the next project. But how big are these projects? I mean, how truly large are they? Well, first of all, in eastern Pennsylvania, if you did all I-95, and I think it will happen all at once, there aren't enough civil engineers with experience in highway and bridge construction to do the job. I mean, it'll fill the consultants' offices, and they'll be bringing people from all over to work for them, subcontracting. Construction-wise, you don't have enough tradespeople in southern New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania to do all this work. People will actually move here from our part of the state where we don't have work. We'll be moving to Philadelphia and working during the week. Materials-wise, we have a materials industry in Pennsylvania that's geared to meet $1.5 billion a year of construction materials. So all of a sudden you pick up the phone and you call Michelle at the local dealer and you say, Michelle, I need 30,000 tons of steel tomorrow here. Well, she says, our capacity is X. We don't have that. So it's going to put tremendous stress on the supply industry, whether it's concrete, steel, rebar. The most wonderful problems that you can ever have are those kind of problems. Right now, 50% of all the carpenters in Pennsylvania aren't working. 42% of all the laborers aren't working. So what happens if they get a huge recall and they start complaining about having to work overtime and 60 hours a week? That's just terrible, isn't it? Now, the other thing that does that is not considered is that we spend a tremendous amount of money on I-95 in regular state maintenance. That would go away with the concession. That would free up in the 5 counties down there a tremendous amount of maintenance money that the department could use in the other 5 counties.
You mean the private partner who runs the highway?
Right, they maintain it.
Responsible for maintenance.
Absolutely. Okay. It's all part of the concession. And
one of the concerns that I've heard from people who don't understand, and I certainly don't fully understand how a P3 would work, but a public-private partnership would start out with the need for billions of dollars, we'll say. First, to buy the concession from the state, right?
Well, there would be a price on the negotiation of the contract. All P3 contracts are a little different. No two are the same.
Okay.
And there's all kind of different ways to structure it. Primarily what you'll have is an upfront large infusion of capital. And contract-wise, I think the smallest contract I've ever read for a concession was 265 pages, even down to dead deer being removed within hours. I mean, it's very well thought out. The industry is very much up to speed. It's new in Pennsylvania. It's not new all over North America. 37 other states have it. And Canada's been using it for years, probably as effectively as any country in the world. So we're going to have a lot of good people doing good things in the state of Pennsylvania.
Well, walk us through, though, just like the big issues. Somebody comes in and says, I want to buy the rights for a truck lane or truck lanes on Interstate 78. The state gets some cash money up front, right?
Yeah, they can.
They can. Okay.
What will happen on a lot of these big projects, the state will advertise it. Mm-hmm. And then groups will put proposals together and come to the state. It'll be reviewed and then acted upon. And if it's acted upon favorably and they pick one group, then they will negotiate with them. The other way of doing a project in Pennsylvania, and I wanted to make sure that was in the legislation, is to have unsolicited, so that people could come with unsolicited proposals. And we know that there's some projects that people want to do that way, whether it's the Allegheny Valley Railroad or whether it's Pitcairn, which is a railroad guy I never thought about until somebody came to my office and said they wanted to privatize all the container movements and put their own private bridge across the river to hook up to the turnpike. And I said, well, why would you want to do that? And they said, well, the container traffic in Philadelphia is going to grow exponentially with the Panama Canal and what's happening with the Mississippi. And this is a logical point for containers.
And if we dredge the Delaware River, we'll have more traffic there.
Yeah, it's good. That's a must. That's another economic development project that's good for all of Pennsylvania.
But then the company who wins the concession to operate the road, build and operate the road,
Right.
they've got to come up with capital to do the construction.
That's right.
work,
PennDOT and the state have to be satisfied that the guarantees are there.
And this comes to, now I've walked it all the way around the block. I've heard people who are worried that China is going to come and buy these roads,
Well,
and some foreign capital.
that's not going to happen.
Okay.
The property's not leaving.
Okay.
The money packages that will be put together will have many sources in them. And a lot of those sources, let's face it, are labor pension funds. Whether it's the Quebec Teachers Fund or the California Teachers Fund or the Pennsylvania Fund, these people invest in these concessions because it's a very long-term return on investment. And for defined benefit plans, like most of these plans are, where you can get 9 or 13% on your money investing in infrastructure, there's nowhere in the bond market you can go now. There's nowhere in the prudent man rule that you can invest money to get the kind of returns that these people can get. Will that work? Yeah. Last week I got a call from a friend of mine who runs a very large labor organization in Washington, D.C., and has been one of the cheerleaders of P3 for the last 10 years. And they're really excited about what can happen in Pennsylvania. And they like to say it's one chance for them to finally invest their pension money in a state where their own people can do the work. So, I mean, there's a lot of different things that will come out of this. I think economic-wise, it's going to be such a home run for Pennsylvania, you have no idea.
Let's shift gears once more and talk a little bit about fuel. We talk a lot about transportation. You can't go anywhere in Pennsylvania today without talking about natural gas. If we started switching cars to natural gas, first of all, we need gas stations, or natural gas stations, to fuel up. But how do we collect highway taxes, highway fees for guys who are using natural gas, or an electric car for that matter?
Well, in 1997, when we did the work, I put an amendment into the legislation that called for a BTU equivalency, British thermal unit. Each gasoline is rated at so many BTUs. So it's very easy to do equivalencies for electricity or natural gas or soybean oil or French fry oil or whatever is propelling and powering a vehicle, so that the state of Pennsylvania would get the equivalency and a user's fee from the person that drives that vehicle, which is dedicated to the liquid fuels. That's the good news. The bad news is we don't think it's being done, and we will be questioning revenue in the governor's office as to why not. And hopefully that will be part of what's going on in the future.
So the equivalency that we would work, I'm told natural gas for an automobile use, CNG, compressed natural gas, is about $1.50 a gallon. Even if you put some sort of user fee on top of it, it's still going to be $1 or more cheaper.
Oh, it'll be much cheaper. And as a old cam head, give me that natural gas, 145 octane. It burns so cleanly, yeah, and it burns so cleanly you don't have to have all the plumbing on there. I'm going to have the hottest Corvette in Altoona.
I thought you were going to put it on your 12-speed.
No, it's an absolutely wonderful energy source. And one of the P3 projects that's being mentioned is with a large transit company, where they would come in as a P3, set up all the fueling stations, the storage, and convert every vehicle in the fleet. And then they would, of course, have a contract that they would buy their natural gas from them to pay for that concession, so that they could actually really decrease the operating costs drastically for the transit agency, and at the same time provide a service that they don't have to go out to the bonding market and borrow a lot of money and then pay for it. So, I mean, there are so many win-win scenarios here. It's unbelievable.
So the Geist plan, under the Geist plan, we could have natural gas fueled automobiles be energy independent in the state alone.
It's actually doable, and I would start with delivery fleets and school buses. And I think that those are great P3 projects. The conversion is about $4,500 an engine for a school bus, and And from there, you saved the school district a tremendous amount of transportation costs. Shared ride, of course, as you well know, is one of the huge problems we have in Pennsylvania. And nobody should ever be a prisoner in their own home, ever.
And this is our rural areas.
Right, and that's mass transit. And there's an opportunity there for us to coalesce the fleets, run them with natural gas, and provide a wonderful rural service, and drastically cut the amount of state dollars that go into doing the same thing. Transportation costs, whether it's senior citizen centers or Skills Incorporated and all those different ones, they all run a jitney service, and it's very expensive. When you have shared ride costs that go up to $30 a ride, you've got to find a way to cut it. And when you're filling up that SUV that haul these kids around, you know, $120, $240, I mean, a week, huge cost. But you still have to be able to pick them up and deliver them. So I think we're onto something. I think it's something very, very positive.
So you've been on transportation for 30 years. This is a pretty exciting time, perhaps?
Well, it's exciting in one way and it's depressing in another. We have known for 4 governors exactly how bad the situation is. So you can't say it's Republican or Democrat. A Republican is in the chair right now. But, you know, Rendell used to always say to me, send me a bill, send me any bill, I'll sign it. Well, that's fine, but we never had a greenback. And now we're at the position where we're looking for
Greenback being a bill
a governor from the administration. We're in a position now where we really need a greenback piece of legislation or the package of legislation. Once that agreement is made with the House and Senate leadership, I think it's possible to fund roads and bridges and try to stop the deterioration, the rapid deterioration, first of all, fix what's broken, and then finally get into a program where you address capacity.
We'll ask you to come back again in a month to 6 weeks, maybe, and see how things are turning out.
Yeah, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Been talking with State Representative Rick Geist, Chairman of the House Transportation Committee. Thanks again.